The advice and opinions expressed by Dr. Granpeesheh and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism. Now you can ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. I'm Shannon Penrod, and I'm here with the amazing and wonderful Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh. But every time I hear your son say that in the voiceover and hear how he pronounces your name, I have thoughts of I've been saying your name wrong for 20 years. How do you say your name?
Well, okay, first of all, hi, Shannon, and hi, everyone. It's lovely to be back. So there is no correct pronunciation of my name because you can't write it the right way. So the right way to actually pronounce my name, because my name is Iranian, is Granpeesheh. And you can't do Geron because if you put G-E in English, it turns into Jera, the J sound, right? So when I grew up in England, we just started with Granpeesheh, and that's how you pronounce it, Granpeesheh, and like no emphasis on any part of it.
Okay. It's crazy to know you this and respect you this long, and every once in a while I go, how do I say your name?
The number of different things that people have said in being able to pronounce that name, I don't know. It's funny.
But it's a beautiful name, and you are a beautiful person and a beautiful mind. For those of you who might be joining us for the first time, this is a live show. We're live right now. The date is the 4th of February, 2025, if you can believe that. We're doing a live show. We're doing it in kind of the format that we used to do back during the pandemic because I'm having some stuff that we don't want anybody else to have. So I appreciate that this team is so supportive and that I can be here with you today and not be spreading germs. It's a wonderful thing. But this is not an old show. This is a new show, and very excited to be back with Dr. Granpeesheh. Hopefully I said that right. I'm going to be self-conscious about it all day long. If you don't know her, she is, oh my goodness, a world-renowned expert in the field of autism. I believe the preeminent expert in our time, and there is no other time than now. And she has been working for well over 40 years to help individuals on the spectrum to reach outcomes that are meaningful to them, but also to support the people around them who love them, to help that progress happen. I believe that she sees around corners. She sees things before they come. Nobody has a bigger heart or more generosity to this community than she does. So it's and just a brilliant mind. So it's such a thrill that she joins us whenever she can during this Tuesday morning time slot so that you guys can ask her questions. And we do like to give you the disclaimer that it's important that you realize that there is no expert who could give individual specific advice in this format. That would be a disservice to the individual and to the expert. But it doesn't mean that she can't help you to know what's the next question to ask or give you a piece of information that maybe you weren't aware of that can really supercharge your next steps. So please feel free to start writing in. We are live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and about a dozen other sites. Our remarkable Chris Desmond, who makes all things possible, will show you some of the different ways on the screen that you can connect with us. We know that some of you like to watch the live show, and we love it when you interact with us. So write in now on whatever platform you're on, and we'll take live questions. We do have a topic. We'll talk about that in a second. But we know that the lion's share of you are catching us in podcasts. We are available wherever you get your podcasts, and it's a free download wherever you get your podcasts. Now, that means that you will hear ads play, and I hope that when you hear the ads play that you kind of celebrate and go, woohoo, these people are paying for me to get this free download. However, if that doesn't make you happy and it frustrates you in any way, know that for a very small fee, for $5 a month, you can subscribe to the channel and get everything that we do on Autism Media Network, everything that we do. You can get it ad-free. For $5 a month, all you have to do is go to glow.fm/autismlive. $5 a month, and it shows up in your inbox. That includes Ask Dr. Doreen, Autism Live, all the stuff that we do there, and anything that we do is going to show up there in your inbox automatically. So definitely check that out. I feel like I have forgotten something really crucial and important, but I'm sure it'll occur to me. We always start with a starter topic, and our starter topic today is what to do when you really want to work on independence goals, but at the same time, you're concerned about safety. And sometimes it's hard to balance those two. I've been hearing from a lot of parents, and we've gotten a lot of questions in the last 2 weeks, Dr. Granpeesheh, that show me that people are struggling with this. And I know I struggled with this. So I want to jump in and ask the first question. And we've got a nice mix of questions for people who are adults, teenagers, and littles. So I thought that was kind of remarkable. Our first question is, my son is 17, and I'm feeling pushed. The team around us, who has been so helpful, is suddenly pushing independence goals that I'm not sure he's ready for. They want me to work on giving him more autonomy, and while this is a dream, I am terrified. For instance, they want me to start leaving him at home alone, at first for 5 minutes and then 10 minutes, until we can work up to 2 hours. I just don't know why. Things are going well. So much can happen in 2 hours. Is this even a realistic goal? I can't picture this ever working, and I don't know why all of a sudden they're pushing this agenda. Does he really need to be able to pick the cereal that is the best deal? I'm worried that there is some cookie cutter program that starts at 17 that doesn't fit my son's needs, but they're going to make me do it anyway. What do you advise?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that it's important, Shannon, to talk about two different things here that's happening in this. One is the concern that every parent has that their child is not safe, and that I will, and 17 is a long time for this parent to have been taught to be overly cautious, right? I mean, it's not, over time, we realize, I have to really watch over my child. And so letting go of that is a very difficult thing. And I think that independence is good for everyone. I mean, Shannon, we've had also folks who have autism who have come on our show and have said, what can I do to get some independence from my parents? So it is good for everyone, but I strongly believe that parents know their kids best, and we have to pay attention to that fact as well. That said, I think that you have to just try it. You don't need to do 2 hours. You can try the 5 minutes and see how that feels. Try the 10 minutes and see how that feels. Realize that giving the child or the adolescent independence will broaden their horizons and give them a lot of different opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise have, like having friends and hanging out with friends, maybe going to environments where you're not involved, and so on. And also realize that they're not always going to have you around. So sooner or later, learning independence is an important thing. And as far as, as long as you think that your child has the skills for safety, that's just, you have to teach safety first, right? If they know the things to do in different situations, and you do this cautiously and over a period of time, then I think everything will be okay, and you'll come out on the other side feeling better about it. This is very similar to parents who talk about, I know my child won't sleep through the night unless they sleep with me. It's one of those very difficult decisions that we make with our kids, is letting them go through maybe a period of time that either is difficult for them or difficult for us, in order to have this longer term benefit, right? So those are all things that I want you to think about. But the other side of this question appears to me that there is no trust between this parent and their provider. And that is, I think, a very, very, very important factor to pay attention to. Ultimately, it is the provider's job to advise you, not to force you to do anything. You are the parent. By the way, your child is 17. By 18, they have the right to make these decisions. So you probably either, depending on your child's level of functioning, you might want to look at conservatorship or guardianship before they turn 18, or just not, and let them go off on their own if they are able to. But the bottom line is no provider should be making you uncomfortable. That's not their job. Their job is to sit with you and discuss just what I did. Like, these are the things that he'll be able to benefit from. These are the things your child will be able to do. This is why it's important. Shannon, you and I used to have these discussions, like, about letting him go off to school, that kind of stuff. But the truth is, ultimately, it's the parent has to be the one to make the decision, to feel comfortable about it. And you have to be able to trust your provider. No provider should be following a cookbook approach, right? Every child is different. Every parent has different goals for their child based on what they know about their child. So those are important things. And if you don't feel comfortable with your child, then with your provider, then I think you might want to look at other providers.
I think that's so wise, everything that you just said. I just want to admit to everybody that I'm not great at this. That this whole thing of working on independence versus the safety, it's not my forte. And you still have to push me. Mm-hmm. And there are things that you have not been successful at pushing me because you're such a kind friend to me, that I know that there are things that you'd like to get in there and be like, Shannon, go to Bali for 2 weeks, and when you come back,
he'll be fine.
Jem will be driving trucks, right?
Well, Jem now pushes you himself, so I don't need to.
He does. But I want to say it's a real thing, and that I have real empathy for parents, and that we come by it honestly, because when other parents were getting used to their children toddling off without them, we were being told, whatever you do, you got to keep eyes on them, because, the number one cause of death is drowning, and, we had a lot more to deal with for a lot longer. It's a habit that's really hard to break. But I do want to say to everybody, we have to forgive ourselves for that. But I also want to say that one of the things that I notice, and maybe you can talk about, Dr. Granpeesheh, that I find that I'm talking with a lot of parents about, is that if you're working with a team of people, whether it's an ABA team or it's the school or the speech and language pathologist, I know for me sometimes as a parent, I would feel like anything that didn't go my way felt adversarial. And I think it's really important for us all to remember that we're not the client, our child is. Mm-hmm. The school has an obligation to say what is best for the child. The speech and language pathologist has an obligation to say what's best for your child. Mm-hmm. An ABA provider legally is obligated, if they're being paid by insurance, to tell you what is best for your child. That doesn't mean you have to do it, but it's their obligation, and I think sometimes parents feel betrayed by that. Well, but what I want is this. And that's fine, say what you want, but they still, correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Granpeesheh, they still have an obligation to say what is best for your child. And it's hard for us sometimes because we do want both things. We want independence, but we want safety. And, if they're telling us, well, it would be good for your child to try 5 minutes, that's not them betraying us. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important to remember.
Yeah, so this can go on into a big conversation. Okay. Maybe we should have that conversation. I guess here's my issue with the field as a whole, right? I mean, I think you're right, absolutely. Every, doctors, healthcare providers are supposed to do no harm, right? And they're supposed to, as you said, say what is best for the patient, for the client. Unfortunately, there's a few things that kind of conflict with that, right? One thing is that, unfortunately, payers don't really want to know what's best for the client. They want to know what they are obligated to do in the shortest period of time, So that fact, the fact that payers push back on what's right and best for the patient, does influence providers, right? There's no question about it. So that's one thing. So there's this kind of counter energy, I guess, or force that makes the provider tend to want to go through a set of steps and let go of the child as soon as possible. That is very real and it exists. So that's one. The second issue is, I don't think, because of the growth of autism, because of the increase of autism, the prevalence over the last 10 or 15, 20 years, and the fact that it has increased so dramatically, there simply are not enough well-educated, well-trained providers. They just are not. And so sometimes you have, young individuals, and I hate to say this because I can say this now at my age and having had years and years of experience with thousands of kids. And there was a time when I was 27 and I had gotten my doctorate degree and I would come into this world and I knew very little about child development and, I hadn't had my own kids and all that sort of stuff. And if you really think about it, Shannon, the majority of the providers out there, BCBAs out there, are in their 20s. They have not yet had children and they don't have a whole ton of experience. In fact, the problem with, I think one of the problems with the field is that for BCBAs who are taught and are very, very good at modifying behavior, right? That is what they learn. They don't learn about the diagnosis of autism. It's like, and they don't learn about the medical aspects of autism. They don't learn about all the things that go into being an autistic individual. So it makes it harder for me to trust, I guess, as a parent. That's why I always think that it's got to be a very collaborative effort, right? It has to be, and that's why trust becomes such an important thing. And that you remember, you would sit with your supervisor, Sabrina, and you trusted. You sat together, and she would say one thing, and you would say another thing, and you'd come together, and it made sense to you as a parent. And those types of things are very important because you were a self-aware parent that could say, oh, this is not about him. This is about me. This is about my fear. It's not about his capability. And that's what's, I think, very important. And yes, you had a supervisor who could always say, we can do more, right? But again, it's got to be, the trust has to be there, and both sides have to agree on it, and you have to feel good about it as a parent. You can never, just give in and say, okay, I'm going to do it just because you're telling me to.
That's so true, and thank you, because sometimes I get all black and white on it. But the truth is that Sabrina would come to me. I always say she's like a stealth bomb. Sabrina would come to me and want to do something, and my gut would say no. And then she would draw it out of me. Okay, what are your concerns?
Yep.
And she would help me to see that the choice was mine. But she would lay out two scenarios for me. I called it the pause, that she would tell me this, if we go this pathway, this is what he will learn. And if we go this pathway, this is what he won't learn. And here's what the outcome would be. And in that way, then she would say to me, so what would you like to do?
Yeah.
She would just ABA the snot out of me.
Exactly.
I mean, really. And I think how frequently I think about how lucky I got that I had her. But I think you're right. Probably everybody doesn't have that. And I never want to say to parents, don't advocate and don't say what you want. But I do want them to consider that sometimes what our child needs is not the first go-to on our list.
Yeah.
But I love that the thing that's very telling in what this parent said was, she said, they want me to work with him on autonomy. And while this is a dream, she has dreamed of this.
Yep.
And then she said, I am terrified. And I think that's the crux of all of it.
That is very, very important. That's right. That's very telling.
Yeah. But you can get through it. And it's possible that as you walk through it, you will get to a better place and your child will get to a better place.
That's right.
I've seen miraculous things happen. I want to go on to the next question. I just want to check in because we're getting our questions in a different way. I want to say that Rosie says hi, and Shy One says safety comes first. And I love that you would address that it's important to teach the safety first. But I love this question because it makes me think of a scenario that we had here on the show where somebody wrote in and how that turned out. They said, my daughter is 25. She was diagnosed with autism at 11. She is a wonderful young woman who lives at home, and that is our plan. When we are gone, she will live with her sister. We have seen to all of that, and she is fully conserved. Now, out of nowhere, she has told us that she would like to go to college.
No.
Specifically, the community college that is just a few miles away. I honestly don't know where this is coming from. She has never mentioned it before. She does not have a high school diploma. She has a completion certification. She has always hated school, but now she says she wants to go. I immediately said no. I think it's just setting her up for frustration and failure. Plus, she will be with people who aren't trained to deal with her meltdowns. She could be bullied or taken advantage of, and for what? My husband says we have to consider her request. I feel like I've fallen down the rabbit hole. Should we consider it? I don't have the faintest idea of how it could work. I love your show and respect your advice.
That's such a great situation to be in. It's kind of an exciting situation to be in, honestly. So why can't you do it? You can absolutely do it. Take your time and teach her and get her help and get her tutoring and help her select something very easy and introduce her gradually. And there's so many things you can do. And what a wonderful thing that she has interest in this, right? And you know what? If she fails, that's a whole nother lesson of life, right? So, and you'll be there for that too. And you'll be there to support her and help her understand that maybe junior college is not the right choice and maybe she should engage in something else. But what it tells me is that she has awareness of options around her. She has interest in the world, which is amazing. And she has the self-confidence to believe she can do it. Oh my God, that's fantastic, those three things, right? So now, as a parent, you just have to give her the skills, which certainly you can, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what the age of the individual is. You can certainly get ABA, and you can hire tutors, and you can teach her yourself, and you can put her online. There's so many opportunities for learning online. And you can even have her take a class online before she actually goes to JC. There's so many things you can do. And sometimes, Shannon, we are just so shocked by change, by something that happens in the world. And we're like, whoa, 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 whoa. I did not expect this. And we just put down our heels and we're like, no, 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 no. And if you think about it for a moment in a different way and say, okay, why not? This could be a cool thing. This could be an amazing, life-changing thing. Why shouldn't I do this? And just, this is all about fear. It's so interesting that our show, these are parental fears.
Yeah.
Because we learn, as I said, to protect our kids for so long, and it just becomes very, very difficult to let them do something out of the ordinary, right? Yeah. And maybe something that we feel fearful about for various reasons. Absolutely. So I say embrace it. It's a wonderful thing.
And I want to encourage them to call the college because it's entirely possible that the college already has a program for this kind of thing. So, ask before you decide. I also just want to tell the story that it was probably we were in our third year. So we're talking over 10 years ago that we had a young woman write into the show. I'm sure you remember her. And she said, I want to go to college.
I do remember this.
And we had months of going back and forth where she was saying, what can I say to my parents to convince them? And she would come back with their counter argument. And apparently there was one day when she had burned something on the stove and they were like, you can't even boil water. But ultimately they relented and let this young woman take classes. Now, the thing that has really struck me in the last 10 years is that she gained so much more independence and was able to do so many more things and get a job and do all of these things. And then her mom passed away. And I remember thinking, this is just the most horrible thing. And how is she getting through this? And she was doing okay. And then within a year, her dad passed away. And now she's living with a relative, but she's living with a relative in such a different way as a person who's contributing to the family and to society around her. And I find myself, because we're friends on Facebook, and she'll post something and I see these amazing things that she's up to. And I think, what if it had gone the other way?
Yeah.
What if it had gone the other way and they kept her home and kept her safe, but then they passed away, and that would not have been what those parents wanted. So, I love that dad spoke up for her, and I love that even though mom is terrified, she's like, should I consider it? So there you go.
Yeah.
Now we got one about a much younger child, and I think this is very typical of families. They say, I would like your advice. Our 4-year-old son has an intensive ABA program. My husband and I are very committed to doing everything possible for our son to lead his best life. I just have started to notice, though, that my husband has a tendency to push back or simply not follow the plan anytime our son meets with the slightest frustration. He shuts things down and instead rewards him with things he loves. I have tried to bring this up gently, but he gets defensive and tells me that I am pushing him too hard. Our team are all very lovely, but very young and unmarried, and I don't know that they can help me with this. Yeah. What do you advise? How can I get my husband to see that coddling him will slow his progress? And what do I say to his comment that I am pushing too hard? I've read the science, and I see my baby flourishing when given the chance. Isn't this the time to be pushing?
Yeah. Yeah. What a dilemma, right? It is the time to be pushing. I will say, first of all, it is really the time to be pushing. And usually we do try to do as much as we possibly can before the age of 7, right? There's lots of reasons for that. Not only is the research that supports intensive work, intensive ABA, kind of cuts out around age 6, 8, so on. And then you are left with fewer hours to teach. The main reason is that there's a lot of brain plasticity before the age of 7. So that's why when a child is exposed to numerous languages before the age of 7, they just pick it up, right? They pick up languages like that because the brain is at that stage growing nerves, neurons, and dendrites everywhere and can pick up whatever you push. So this is definitely the time to push. I think the question is more how to convince how for you and your husband to come to a middle ground in regards to what is the right pace of pushing, right? And this is where, as you know, Shannon, I always say the whole experience has to be fair for the child. So I think that you as a mom should be focused on how to demonstrate to your husband 2 things. One is that it is fair, and the other is that your child is learning. Those 2 things, like he can do it, and we're doing it in a fair way, right? So he can do it. How do we demonstrate that? Take a task that your child doesn't know yet and ask the team and yourself to actually teach it to him, and then go back to your husband and say, hey, look at what he just learned. Yeah. We were not pushing too fast. Look at what he's capable of. He's capable of a lot more. Talk about that. Because I think it's important for your, parents. I mean, we've been talking about how we all protect our kids. dads have a very interesting angle when they look at their kids, and a lot of it, I mean, a lot of times there are also dads who are pushing their kids and so on, but there are a lot of dads who are, it's the dad's job to protect the whole family type of thing. That's how they look at it. So I understand where he's coming from, and I don't think you should push in the sense of making your spouse defensive. That just doesn't work for anyone. But I do think that it would be great for your team. One of the things that behavior analysts do, which I think is very valuable, is they graph progress. You look at data. It's not an opinion. You look at data and you can see, like with all of our kids, that how much language they're learning, how many social skills they're learning, and these rates of acquisition are what actually made health insurance want to pay for ABA. It works, right? So being able to show that to your husband, I don't know what he believes in, but finding the thing that convinces him is important, because that is, I think, what will help him a lot. And the other side of it is making sure that things are fair. And that starts with the child actually being happy. Sometimes our kids get frustrated, that's fine. But every child gets frustrated. Have you ever seen a child who doesn't get frustrated when they're learning to ride a bike? Have you ever seen a child not get frustrated when they don't get a math problem right? Like, every child gets frustrated when it's new material and they're not good at it yet. It's a normal thing. Every human gets frustrated. If we were to not get frustrated, we would never learn. Like, let's just be honest. Learning begins with a level of frustration, and we overcome it because we practice and do all the things we do to learn. So make sure, though, that your husband can see that in general, your child is just as happy as everyone else, right? They might have a day where they're frustrated because something hard's happening, but in general, they're very happy. And this is how you can do that. On the days and times when your child is frustrated, later in the same day, reward him more. Increase the reinforcers. This is kind of what I always talk about. As the demand goes up, the reinforcer has to go up. If they're balanced and things are fair, you have a child who's thriving and enjoying and trusting their team to get them through, trusting their team to model and reward, and they know they're going to be able to do this, right? And if they don't, we're going to make it easier. That's the whole basis of ABA, is like, let's reward behavior that is good, that we want to increase. Let's reward skills. And perhaps, maybe, by the way, the other side of the coin is maybe he's frustrated because he's not getting enough reward. So pay attention to that, right? We never want a child to be frustrated for long periods of time. We never want a child to continue to be frustrated to the point where they find something aversive. So, we want to listen to dad's side of it as well, and just make sure he's learning and he's happy about things, even if he gets frustration over new things.
Yeah, I love all of that. I have to say that for me as a child, my parents were wonderful people, but they had not been taught and did not teach us how to deal with frustration or our feelings. It wasn't how anybody talked about anything. And so it's only been as an adult and sometimes watching my son be taught how to deal with frustration. And I look to him as my best guide. And I remember years ago, I know I've talked about this before, I was watching a video of another little boy having therapy, and his mom, he was frustrated, and his mom was outside the door crying, and I was crying watching it. And Jem was 10 and came up behind me, and he said, "Why are you crying, Mom?" And I said, "Oh, because it's hard. I remember when it was like this for you." Yeah. Yeah. And he said, "I don't understand why. I know why the kid is crying. He's frustrated, but why is the mom crying? Why are you crying?" And I said, "Because it's hard for us when you're frustrated. We feel it deeply. You're frustrated." And he said, "But doesn't the mom know that frustration is just a sign that things are about to change?" This was my 10-year-old who had been through this program and had been through what this little boy was going through. And I thought, God, he's so wise. But he was given skills of how to deal with frustration and to realize that frustration is real, it's present, and it's part of a process. It's not a stop. It's not a hard stop, and that when we stop, we make them bake in it. And that's not a good thing. That he learned that, okay, I'm frustrated. How do I want to deal with those feelings and continue on?
Yeah.
And he uses that every day.
Yeah.
And I use that when I remember, because I learned that watching him do that. It's so funny, the misinformation that we bring to things that I will hear parents say something, well, I just don't want him to be tired out. And the truth of the matter is, if it's fair, that piece that you were talking about, I don't ever see anybody at Disneyland go, this is going to tire him out. We just can't.
Yeah.
And if you stay a whole day at Disneyland, you will see children get frustrated. It's the happiest place on earth, but children get frustrated. They get tired. They have a mini meltdown. They rest, and then they're, ready to,
Exactly.
and nobody's being harmed, right? So we can stop being afraid as long as we're mindful of the fair piece.
Yeah. Shannon, I often talk about, this is what you're saying is so true. I often talk about how things change when we get that diagnosis of autism. We stop. I tell a lot of parents when I do their initial diagnosis or their first evaluation after the diagnosis, I often tell them, if you want him to behave in a certain way, you have to treat him as if he is able to behave in that way. And what happens is when we get that diagnosis, we're just like, oh my gosh, I have to be hands off. I have to let him do whatever he wants. It's autism. I have to walk on eggshells. I have to be so careful. I can't treat him like I would any other child, my other children. And that is not right. It's just not right, because
Not fair.
you're making an assumption that your child with autism is not intelligent enough to learn from the rules of society. That's not a fair assumption. That your child will learn all these things of what is allowed and what's not allowed, that they get through frustration, and that that they can socialize, that they can communicate. In fact, kids with autism are so incredible that if they don't have the ability to speak, they learn other ways to communicate. I mean, that's how intelligent they are, So we have to respect that and allow that. And the only way we can allow that is by actually treating them the same, right? So it's okay if he gets frustrated. You gave a great example, and he'll be fine, as long as it's fair.
I have to say, I try not to be judgmental, especially of parents, because I don't know everybody's circumstances, and emphasis on the try, because I'm just being honest here. But I have to tell you, the thing that tears my ticket the fastest is when I'm out in public and I see a teenager or an adult on the spectrum engage in a behavior that I know is going to make life hard for them in the short run and in the long run, and the parent raises their hands and goes, well, he's autistic, he's on the spectrum, as in that's the excuse, and it makes me mad. Yeah. Now, it makes me mad on behalf of that young person, because they don't know this is preventing me from having the friends that I want, from being able to do the things, and I know they're capable of learning it. Yeah. And I'm frustrated for the parent that they don't see that.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of a moment where they're stuck, but more than anything, it makes me feel bad for that young adult, because I can see how people are looking at them, and it's not fair.
Exactly. It's amazing that you're giving this example, because as you know, I have a young man who has autism in my neighborhood, and one of the things I actually didn't notice about him before, but occasionally when I take my dogs for a walk, he wants to join me, and he can join me. But one of the things I noticed is that he will suddenly scream, right? And it's not Tourette's, but he chooses, it's a self-stimulatory type of activity. And so I had a conversation with him about it, and I said, and the other thing about him is that he's lonely. He's very lonely. He often talks to me about that. And so I had a conversation with him about that, and I said, how do you think other people see this when you do this, right? And can you just do it when you're alone? And I'm telling you, it has changed him completely. Like, he really doesn't do that, and because he just wasn't aware of this. No one had given him the benefit of the doubt to be able to tell him, this, by the way, is not probably why you're not making friends, you know?
You've reminded me, I need to reach out to him because he was one of Joanne Laura's buddies. And he,
Yeah.
he would call her and say, hey, I see that they're doing this Gloria Stefan show. Would you like to go? And they would go to the theater together and have a lovely time together. And I need to reach out to him. Thank you, because he's a lovely human being, and I know he misses her. We've got a bunch of people write in. Nessie wrote in and said, we struggle mostly with our child's fear and lack of trust in himself to become independent.
hmm And
Anything
so I'm so glad somebody brought that up, because there's, when I was directly working with kids myself, there were a lot of anxieties and phobias that I could see my children have. And we would actively work on those. And I don't see those issues coming up in behavior plans as much anymore. I think it's because a lot of people just ignore the child's anxiety. Phobias are a form of anxiety, obviously. So it is very important to address those fears, right? It is very, very important. And social phobia or just agoraphobia, like having a fear of going out alone, having a fear of being in social situations, separation anxiety, having a fear of being away from the family, all those types of things are very real. And when someone has a diagnosis of autism, we tend to, it overshadows all these other things. And we never even think of, by the way, this is not a characteristic symptom of autism, it's a side effect. I need to kind of work on it. A phobia is not one of the symptoms of autism. Let me just be very clear. It is there, it's very, very real, because the individual, I would feel phobic, I would have higher anxiety if I couldn't understand language, couldn't understand people, couldn't understand the pace of information coming at me, had sensory issues, all that. The symptoms of autism, in my mind, actually do really lead to having a heightened level of anxiety. In fact, there's a lot of research on that individuals with autism have higher percentages of anxiety than the normal population. So it is very important to deal with those anxieties, and there's lots of different, both behavioral and non-behavioral kind of cognitive methods to deal with anxiety. We've talked about anxiety a lot. There are lots of different treatments. I do suggest that maybe for this viewer, they can go back and look at. I did a whole, I think, hour-long thing on anxiety, and both.
You've done two. There's part 1 and part 2. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
where we talked about behavioral, like systematic desensitization, and a lot of cognitive behavioral, depending on where the child or individual is at, and how much understanding and awareness do they have of their own anxiety. But that you should address it for sure.
I really want to encourage people. Our YouTube channel is just a wonderful library full of videos. And if you go on it and put in Ask Dr. Doreen Anxiety Show and put part 1 or part 2, whatever, it will pop up. And you'll be able to go back and watch a really incredible program, 2 hours that was so, oh my gosh, I learned so much from. And we've done other shows about anxiety, but that's the definitive 2 hours, really important. And I also think too, one of the things that I feel like parents are talking more and more about is there a way to bake into my ABA program to build my child's self-esteem, which I think is a great question and can counteract some of this where they're uncertain of themselves. And
Absolutely.
Ask your team, what can we do to be building the self-esteem? I'm sure it's different for every child, but critical. Self-esteem should
Very
be
critical. I totally agree with you, Shannon. Yes.
I'm so excited. Esther is with us, and I don't know if I don't know if we've talked about it, but Esther was with us. She and her husband supported us at the All Ghouls Gala this year. And Esther, I felt so bad because I was standing talking with you, and then I said, let me go find my son. So you could meet my son, and then I couldn't find you anymore. So I do apologize. But She says, my 5-year-old son is potty compliant, but how do I teach him to request the potty when he has to go? Great question.
Yeah, it's a really gradual process where we put the individual on a schedule. I think when you say potty compliant, that means that he is already on a schedule. That means that on whatever schedule it might be, and you might want to tell us, you remind him to go to the potty, and then he goes to the potty. So if that's the case, then there's another phase after that, which you basically want to make sure that your child is independent when they go to the bathroom, right? Because if you're trying to get them to a point where they independently go, then you want to make sure that even if you're reminding them to go, they're able to do all the things that are involved with going. So opening the door, turning on the light, taking their pants down, sitting, going, wiping themselves, washing their hands. The whole thing has to be mastered on a compliance schedule. And then all you have to do is fade your reminder out, which is not that hard to do. So there's lots of different ways to do that. Obviously, you can first, one of the funny ABA things we do is you just reduce the verbal reminder. You can have visual, you can have pictures. You can actually just look at your watch and say, oh, and like point to. You can show a picture of the individual going to the bathroom. You can ask the child, what time? Do you know what time it is? Guess what? The more you fade yourself out and reward heavily the child, and there's lots of different ways to reward. Remember, if you make the bathroom itself one of the most rewarding places, your child's going to want to go. In fact, they're going to want to go more often than they need to go. That becomes another problem, so be careful with that. But those are some of the things you can do, and they will get there. But first, make sure your child is able to do all the steps involved with going to the bathroom. A lot of times, parents forget that, and then the child is ready to go, but they actually need help, to go.
What an important point. I don't think I would have thought of that. Listen, I have so many fond memories now. I was terrified the whole time we were doing potty training because my fear was it's not going to work. But now I look back and it was just such a happy time. I had this belief that if you give a parent a job, boy, we know what to do. And they kept giving me jobs. They were like, you got to make this bathroom decorated and a fun place, and you need a basket of books and toys. And oh my gosh, it was so much fun for me.
Oh, yeah.
And, I had to get the kind of pull-ups that he would love. Give me a job and I know what to do. And then they showed me how to implement it. But it's a pretty good time. And I think, what's key is that sometimes the answer is so much more simple than we think. Like how do you fade something out? Because we're looking for the end result. Like, okay, now it's all faded, right? But as simple as even taking one word out of the sentence each time and, upward inflecting, like, do you need to, right?
Yeah.
Like we want to make it harder than it is. But, try it because it really works. That's the crazy fun part of it.
Yeah. And also, I know it seems very unnatural, but if you put pictures up in different parts of the house, and they will be a reminder. He will see them and he'll be like, oh, maybe it's time. It'll remind the child.
Especially, like you said, if the bathroom is fun and they get rewarded for it, they'll make a point to remember. Yeah. Our kids are smart. They're really, really smart. I'm saying hi to Michelle and to Helen. So glad to have you guys. I know we've not done a lot of shows, so it's lovely to have everybody in the house. I do want to acknowledge that Nessie said, I will do that. Thank you. Learned a lot from you two already over the last few years. I love that, awesome. Nessie.
Awesome.
I don't know that I ever remember you writing in a question before, so maybe you did and I'm forgetting it, but I'm glad that you wrote in your question. We had one more question that came in before time, but we have time for more questions if you guys have questions. And this, you kind of touched on this a little bit before, but the question was, when is the right time to stop ABA in your opinion? They said, I am a new BCBA and a mom with a 16-year-old getting treatment. I have to admit that I am disappointed when I hear colleagues talking about exiting teens that still could benefit from more treatment. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah. It's funny that this question had come in, and I was kind of alluding to this earlier when we were talking about the ethical responsibilities of BCBAs.
Yeah.
So, and this is what's really fascinating. There is a law in various states. It is in California right now as well, and in other states, some other states, not all states. But, well, actually, let me back up and say, in all states, there's a law that is called the Corporate Practice of Medicine. And this law says that a person who is not a medical doctor cannot own a business that a medical doctor is working in. Okay? You cannot have medical doctors working for corporations.
Okay.
They have to be working for professional corporations. That means the owner of the corporation has to be a doctor as well. Now, that law also applies to ABA in some states. It's not as prevalent as it is for physicians, but it is now also in some states for ABA. And the reason is, the whole background of this law is that if physicians or ABA providers are owned by non-physicians or non-ABA providers or non-professionals, they will not understand that ethical obligation of the professional to do no harm, to do what's right. They will be pressured by making money. That is the basis of the whole law, corporate practice of medicine. And so this is where it becomes an issue, because the truth is, ABA is a teaching methodology. It's a technique that teaches the individual and can continue to teach the individual lots and lots of different things, right? And it can go on forever. It can literally go on until the person is 99 years old. It doesn't matter. It's a way of learning, okay? And it's based on a very, very, very simple protocol in human learning, which is, if I reward a behavior, it's going to increase. If I don't reward it, it's going to decrease. That's it, operant conditioning. And so with ABA, just like it's a more clean version of teaching. When you teach in a school, a child does something good, the parent gives them a star or recognizes them, et cetera, et cetera. That's ABA right there. That is behavior monitoring. That is increasing that behavior. From there on, that child will continue to do more of that good thing because they want that reward. So what happened with ABA and the development of ABA and the application of ABA to autism was actually Ivar Lovas, my mentor. And what he did was he said, okay, well, why don't we take this principle of psychology and apply it to kids with autism? Let's see if we can teach them to overcome all the symptoms. Some of the symptoms are behaviors that are too many, and some of the symptoms are behaviors that are not enough. There's too many self-stimulatory types of things, not enough language, not enough attention, not enough social behavior, etc. Can we teach these things, and can we not reinforce these things? Can we bring the child more to kind of a normal balance of how other kids are behaving, right? Very basic principle, and that's what he did. And he proved that through research, and then it was replicated, and more people did it, and more people realized, oh my gosh, kids with autism learn just the same as other kids. They just need shorter instructions, different rewards, a more cohesive curriculum of learning skills that other kids learn just in society. It's the same exact thing as other kids, just done a little bit more clean, with more like reinforcers, more instructions are very obvious, etc. And so, can you do it with a child who's 16, 25, 40? Yes, of course. You can do it with anyone. It will help them learn. Now, will you be able to get funding for it? It becomes harder and harder because a lot of the research that was published in the beginning that proved that ABA works was conducted on younger children, right? And unfortunately, when that research was done, many different people all over the world did tons of research, including us, and we published all this, and the world came to realize, oh wow, ABA really can change people and can teach them. And we were all happy because it went to insurance companies, and insurance companies learned, oh wow, we need to fund this thing, right? It works. So they started funding it. Now, after that, there are hundreds, thousands actually, of research articles that show adults with not just autism, but Down syndrome, intellectual disability, other types of learning disorders, etc., can also learn from ABA techniques. There's thousands of articles, right? They're just not a comprehensive ABA. They're not focused on teaching the individual everything. They're focused on teaching the individual one thing. For example, we can use ABA today to teach a very severely affected intellectual disabled individual to safely cross the street, to learn how to brush their teeth, to learn how, one thing, right? Focused programs. They're still incredibly effective. Insurance companies, however, came back and said, we're not going to really be paying for massive amounts of ABA for the rest of someone's life. We'll give you lots of ABA for young kids, but unless they show really good progress, we're going to say it's not medically necessary. So that becomes the issue. The issue becomes getting funding for it. So what happens then? So then we go through a whole decade of time where providers are pushing and saying, no, this child is still benefiting. I want to still do this. I want to keep getting more services for this individual because they're learning. Why shouldn't I? And payers started threatening and actually bullying providers and saying, hey, listen, no, we're going to drop you from our network completely if you keep wanting ABA for 16-year-olds and 20-year-olds. This is the truth. Nobody talks about this, but this is the truth. And it's the same with medicine, Shannon. I mean, you see when a doctor comes to see you, they see you for 10 minutes. That's it. Because they're not able to see you they can't bill the service, right? And so now when we request hours for a child, it's limited by that. Even though the law says it shouldn't be limited by age, it is. I cannot ask for a 30-hour-a-week program for a 40-year-old. I just can't. No one will fund it, right? So those are the pressures, I think, that are on behavior analysts, and you as a behavior analyst, this mom, should recognize that. What I suggest you do is that you don't, you change the way the behavior analysts who are asking for funding, you change the way they're asking. Initially, when the child is young, they're asking for just a lot of hours so they can teach your child everything all at once because you're trying to catch up to a deadline, right? Later, you should be asking for focus programs. So you should be asking for specific things. And usually that even is a fight because parents will say, if the child's safe, if the individual, the adolescent is safe, I don't really care. It's not medically necessary. But the definition of medical necessity goes back to the diagnosis, doesn't go to safety, goes to the diagnosis. Anything that will alleviate a symptom of the autism diagnosis is medically necessary.
There we go.
So if you as a parent want your child to learn something that is part of their diagnosis, and if they learn it, if they improve, it's going to improve their life, it's medically necessary. So that's how you go around this, and that's how you continue to get hours and therapy. But I agree with you. ABA works forever.
There we go. I appreciate that so much, and I always appreciate your honesty, boy. You say it like it is, and I appreciate that because I know sometimes you get pushback from that or fallout.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah,
but
that's okay.
but we appreciate you. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I don't know how that happened, but I really want to thank all of you who tuned in and asked questions. Before we leave, I'm saying hi to Rodney, who joined us late. Rodney, we've missed you. That's great. I'm glad you're here. Thank you all for being here, but most especially, thank you, Dr. Granpeesheh.
No, thank you, Shannon, for doing this even though you're still sick. And we'll take it easy on you, and hopefully you and I together with our schedules will be able to be on schedule again with our show.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're gonna. This is 2025, and we're on the positivity train. We're gonna find ways to get into good trouble and do good things in the world. You have always said, if you do enough of the good things often enough, then good things come to pass. And so I want to keep putting quarters in that bank this year. We're going to keep doing good things. So I appreciate you more than you know. It's such a pleasure to be with you. I would get out of my casket to do a show with you. So, because I would go.
Feel better, Jen.
But I'm not. No, I sound worse than I am. I'm doing much better. But thank you so much, and we thank Chris Desmond for making this all possible, and all of you. All right, we're back tomorrow with a great show. We're having Alex Lynn on the show. He is a young man who identifies as being on the spectrum. When he was 16, he started the concert Autism Rocks. He's got an announcement about that. He has, finished college and has been the last year and a half working his job. He has some things he wants to get off his chest, things he wants to talk about. So we'll be here with Alex tomorrow. And then I don't know if you know this, we're having Nick Yates on the show next week.
Oh, that's exciting.
That he very specifically asked and said, I'm ready to come back. I want to, So
when is that? What day is that?
I think that's on Monday, if I'm not mistaken.
Wonderful.
So we've got some big shows coming up that you guys will really, really enjoy. So until tomorrow, I encourage you, we've got a hug for you and one for your kiddos as well. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everyone.